Hi guys, this is Mike. In this Cinema 4D tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use images in Bodypaint. What we'll be doing is opening up images in Bodypaint and we'll be editing them using selection, eyedropper, copy, transform, erase, and fill layer. We'll also be working with layers, new, duplicate, delete, and layer mask. Okay, let's head on over to the Bodypaint layout. So go to this drop down menu and then go to Bodypaint. Now I already went through the paint setup wizard and we have our material already set in, so we can start putting in some images. So in order to do that, we'll go to the texture view. We have our 3D view here. If we click on this tab, we can go to our texture view. Now you'll see the UV map already laid out. If you don't see that, make sure you go to UV mesh and check show UV mesh. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a bun image for this material, for this this mesh right here. So you'll look at this and you'll be like, wow, what is which, and how do you tell what is the bun and the tomato and the cheese and so forth? So the way that you can do that is simply, if you go to objects, make sure you have burger selected and you'll make sure your materials are selected. You can go to layers and then choose a new layer. And this is what I do, and what helps me a little bit is if you just take your brush and with some kind of color, paint in this area and then go to your 3D view, you can see your little mark here, and that where you know what meshes corresponds to what you're going to be applying your paint, or in this case an image, to. So I'm going to go back to texture and you can simply just delete this layer. You now know that this is your bun image. And so what you want to do next is you want to bring in an image. To do that, we'll go to File, Open Texture, and we're going to go to your folder. In this case, it's going to be Images, and I'm going to choose Bun. So in order to get this image onto our material, you'll see if you go to your texture drop down, you'll see we'll have our material here, the matte color, and we'll have our bun image. So in order to get this image over to that texture, what we have to do is we'll have to make a selection. So go to this selection tool, click and hold, and choose this little icon here. This is the freehand selection. So you can just drag, click and drag, and make a selection. Whoops. Let me try that again. I'm going to select, deselect all, and let's get a better selection. So I'm just going to loop around, grab this here, and you can see this marquee. It makes the selection. In order to copy, you can just go to Edit, Copy, or just Command C. So now we'll go over to our texture, our matte color, and we're just gonna paste this in, Command V, and I'm gonna put this into place, and I'm gonna click on this icon here, and that's gonna transform our image. So if you click on this node and pull towards the center, holding down Shift, you'll be able to constrain this, and we can move this into position and just resize it, scale it down until it's as close as you can get it, with the idea of keeping the image, these little seeds, these little sesame seeds, as small as we can get it, so it's a little bit more proportional to our size of our bun. So in order to in order to enable this transform, you can just double click and that will be set. This image will be set. So we have a lot of this extra though, and it's going around and it's bleeding into our other meshes that we have, or other UV meshes. So in order to get rid of that, we can delete it or we can use a mask. So you could use the eraser and that will delete that. But say you wanted to use that later on and that is now deleted. What helps is putting a layer mask on. So in order to do that, I'm just gonna name this bun. And we'll put a layer mask. We'll click on this icon here. And now, if your foreground is set to black and your background is set to white, you can then start taking away, removing these pixels from the image, but they're still there. You're not deleting them. So black will remove. So we'll use left mouse click, and that will remove, and right mouse click will reveal those pixels. So I'm just going to pull this size up a little bit, and I'm just going to remove these as part of the image and just kind of clean it up. You just want to make sure of where this image is coming in and just kind of clean it up a little bit. I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller, zoom in, and just clean this up a bit. So this is pretty much how we're going to apply the images throughout this tutorial. And you're just going to be putting in the images and just kind of putting in a mask and just clearing out a little bit of these excess image that we have. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be cleaned up so it's not bleeding into the other meshes. So let's bring in the next layer. So let's go to our view, our 3D view. We can see we have this, if we zoom in, we see we have this, I guess we could call this just a tomato slice. And we'll have a lettuce slice underneath that. We'll have cheese on this part. We'll have our meat, and then we'll have the bottom bun. Let's get this tomato image in. Let's go to our texture view, and we'll go to File, Open, and we'll choose Tomato. And let's make sure we got the right mesh. So in order to do that, let's go back to our texture view, or excuse me, our matte color. And let's click on our layer, select a new layer, and let's make sure we have the right image. I'm trying to remember which one it is, so I'm just going to make a test here. Okay, so this will be our tomato that we're going to apply our image to. So I'm just going to delete this. And let's go back to our, let's go back to our tomato image. Make a selection. And I'm just choosing this area here since this is the skin that will be visible to the camera. So copy. Let's go to matte color and paste. Now I'm going to move this over and I'm just going to transform. Now, if you don't click on the nodes and you click outside of the bounding box, you'll see this little icon on your cursor. That's going to be your rotate. So anywhere you click and drag outside of this box, you're going to get that rotation. So I'm going to pull this and move this into position. And if you have to, you can transform this holding down shift and then just kind of scale this out, just so we're completely covering this mesh, and double click to set that image. And now we're going to make a mask. I'm going to name this tomato, and I'm going to click here for the mask. We'll go to our brush. Let's get a little bit bigger brush size, and we'll just clear this out. You want to make sure you're nice and clean. And besides, it'll just look good. And you don't have to really clean this up, or take this out, but I'm just going to do it anyway, just kind of clean things up a little bit. Let me bring up a bigger brush size. Just make this look nicer. You'll notice if you add in a larger size, you kind of get more of a feather. So if you want a little bit of a sharper edge, you can turn up the hardness if you want to do that. And now I'm going to bring this back down a little bit. Just zoom in, just make sure I'm good here. And I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time. Although I gotta admit, I do like Bodypaint. It is a pretty fun to just kind of start painting your objects. And I have a background in Photoshop, so all these tools are pretty much easy to, work with. If you already have been using Photoshop, then all these tools should be very familiar to you. So let's go to our next part here. And something I didn't even really think of is that you can paint this area in the 3D view. So you don't have to go to the texture view. You can just bring this size down. I know this is going to be the lettuce. So I'm just going to, and I accidentally painted in the mask, so that didn't actually affect anything. So I just want to make a new layer, and I'm just going to paint in here. I know that's going to be the lettuce, so I'm going to go to the texture view, and you can see this little mark here. So I'll just delete this layer, and I'll be applying the lettuce to this shape here. So we'll go to File, Open, Lettuce. So I just want to make a selection that goes across this image, and I just want to make sure I get more of the focused part of the image. And you can select as much as you want. Just keep in mind that you want to get more of this sharper image. So let me copy, Command C, go back to Matte Color, and we know this is our area that we want to work in. So I'm going to move this over here. This is going to be a little bit tricky. Excuse me. And what we can do is resize this and try to get this to where it looks best. Now what you can do, you can do this a couple ways. You can just move this image into place and just be done with it. But if you want to be a little bit nicer, what you can do is you can move this into place, double click, name this lettuce. And we could also duplicate this image. Oops, excuse me. if you click on this icon here, you can duplicate the layer. And you can move this over to the side. And what we can do is then transform, rotate this around. And the idea here is we can use both images as best as you can and try to get what works. And you can then apply a layer mask. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our brush, jack up the size, pull down the hardness. Let's get this size a little bit larger. And what we can do is then just kind of fade this out. And of course, around the edges, so it's not going over any of the other UVs. Now you'll have to apply 2 layer masks. So we'll go to our first lettuce, our original one, and we'll apply a layer mask, and we'll clean up this image. So if you left it like this, then it would be bleeding into your bun, and it would just wouldn't look very professional. Let me go back to our other layer mask. Looks like we got a little bit here. So you might have to be going back and forth because it's all bleeding into each other. It gets a little bit difficult to know which image is which. And I'm going to bring down the brush size so I can kind of get in here a little bit better. And just get into this little area, clean this up. And I'm going pretty fast. Normally I'd spend a little bit more time, but I think for demonstration purposes, this is pretty good. And I just want to make sure I get this little part. This thin little part is part of the bun. And sometimes when I'm doing the UVs, I kind of feel like I want to make it as easy as possible to flatten out the mesh, so there isn't a lot of stretching and pulling and squishing, which will distort your painting or your image. So let me go back to the other, and I'll do a tutorial on UVs specifically. But this, we're just applying an image. Okay, I think that's good. And you can see, you know, we have some dark areas. It's not perfect. You can see there's a little bit of blurriness, but I think you get the idea here of using two of the same images together in order to apply to the same mesh. And just keep in mind that you're gonna have to blur the mask in those edges so they bleed into each other seamlessly. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to our view, our 3D view. And here's that little thin part I was telling you about for the bun. You can see it's between the tomato and the bun. You can see there's a little bit of a gray there. That's what that thin slice is. And I'll explain that a little bit later. So let's move on to, we got our lettuce. Let's move on to our meat. And we'll do the cheese next. And this bottom part I'll get into. So this is our meat area. And if you want to clean this up and you think you're finished, you can then what you can do is you can merge these two images together, the two lettuce images, if you want to do that. So let's go to a new layer. Let's bring our brush size down a bit, and we're just gonna paint here. Let's go to our texture, and you can see we have our meat in this mesh here. So let's go to File, Open, Meat. And the way that I do this is I'm going to go to our selection and select just this meat part of this image. I don't know why saying meat makes me laugh, but make this selection and then just around, make sure you don't catch any of the other part of the burger. And we'll copy, and we'll go to our, let's go to our matte color, and let's delete this layer and paste. And now let's transform, and we'll move this around. Okay, so now this part is going to be a little tricky, and you can do it a few different ways. You can do what I did with the lettuce, where we have this kind of curve here. Or you can resize this that will cover the entire mesh. And you may have to get pretty large. The issue with this is look how large the details are. So it's just something you want to consider, and I think this will be all right. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I want you to keep in mind that as you're blowing up the image, yes, you're completing the task of covering this entire area, but how will it actually look once you render? So I just want you to keep in mind that as you blow up these details, well, will that look so great? That's something you're going to have to judge in your own projects. So let's name this meat, and we'll go to layer mask. Bring up our brush size pretty large. It's getting a little bit difficult to see the lines. Because this is kind of a darker color. Have a good idea where it is, but you could also use your memory, turn off the layer. Okay, that's pretty much where it is. Like some of these darker areas, it's getting a little bit difficult. I missed a little bit, so let's push this over a little bit. Make sure I'm on the image. Make sure it's covering everything. And let's go back to our brush. Let's go back to our layer mask. Just click on this icon here. Let's bring down our brush size, and let's clean this up a little bit. And make sure you want to really make sure you get this perfect, where there isn't any little bit bleeding into your other meshes, because then it'll just look sloppy. So I'm going to bring down the brush size, get a little bit more precise. Clean this up. And we're in good shape. Just have to do the cheese part, and I'm going to show you how I do that. Let's clean this up, and I think we're good. Okay, so let's go to our texture view, and you can see how things are starting to shape up a little bit. So here's our cheese area. Let's zoom in, and I'm going to make a new layer. Make sure I'm on a layer, and I'll bring down the brush size, and I'm just going to paint here, texture view, and let's see. I'm sure it's here somewhere. That's odd. Let's go back to our F. Pretty sure that we have our mark. Maybe it was too small. Oh, here's our mark here. So we know that's not it. So let me just undo. Let me go back to our 3D view. Try this again. I have a feeling my brush size is a little bit too small. Oh, here we go. I think what happened was a little too small, and it was just kind of blending in with our lines here. Okay, so this is our cheese area. Now, I'm going to, let me just delete this layer and start over. I'll just name this cheese. And I want to go to texture, and I want to go back to our meat. And I want to pick up this color. So let me select, deselect all. So I want to go to our eyedropper, this little icon here. I'm just going to pick out this color. Now what you could do is you could get this, do a selection and do everything that we've been doing. But I think what we can also do is just select that color. You can see it, it's in our foreground here, and it's in our color tab here as well. So let's go back to our matte color. We know this is our area that we want to work in, so what we can do is we can paint this area in with the brush. That's going to take a little bit of time. So what you can also do is you can go to your selection tool that we've been using and carefully select around this mesh. And it's okay if you're on top of the other image because we have a new layer. What you can then do with this foreground selected, you can go to this icon here, click and hold, and go to this paint bucket fill, and that's going to fill that area. So I'm going to select, deselect all, and then 3D view. You can see now we have that color in this area. Okay. So next, the only other thing we need to do is do the same thing we did with the cheese with the bottom of the bun area. So we'll go to texture, and we do know that this is all these sections are part of the bun, including this thin strip. So what I'm going to do is grab our eyedropper, select this area of the bun. I'm choosing like in between these seeds. So we have this color. This is kind of like that tannish color. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just kind of select and drag around. And I might have missed a few areas. I'll go back. Make sure we got a new layer. That's important. And I'm just going to call this bottom bun. Just keep things organized. And we'll do the same fill. So let me zoom in. I think I missed a tiny bit. And I'm just going to fill. Yep, a little part here too. So you just want to be. Now I'm using a mouse. I also have a Wacom tablet. So it makes drawing a little bit easier when you use the pen. Okay, I think we are in good shape here. And now let's do this area here. We can use the same layer. I think that's fine. And I'm just going to select this area, fill. And we have this area here. I guess what I can do, well, let me just do this one first. Now see, when I select and I go over this edge, this selection is going to be also in this side here. So you want to be very careful of that. In this particular case, what you can do is use the rectangle selection. And this will give you a more precise selection. So you can just click and drag. Now you know that it's going to be exactly, because this is a pretty straightforward kind of mesh here. So you can select that. And then we'll just fill. And now we have this one little part here. Fill. I'm doing this in sections because it's a little bit difficult using the mouse for long selections. And I think we're good here. Fill, and we got this pretty much wrapped up. I'm gonna save. We'll go to our picture view. So this is how we have this set up. I know this is a silly little character. I'm gonna show you a few little issues. So I'm gonna go to our startup view. When I made this mesh, and I'm going to turn off sub D. Let me deselect all. So you can see where I made this cut with the mesh. I just cut in between the bun and this tomato. Now the mistake that I made was I made these polygons are a little too close to the edge of the bun and the tomato. If I pushed in a little bit further, you wouldn't see this bleeding effect where it looks like the bun is bleeding into the tomato. It's not a big deal for this purposes, but I just wanted to point that out for just your own reference. And we'll probably have this issue here with the cheese. Now you can see I did a decent job. I pulled this in all the way towards the center. And now we'll eliminate when you put in the sub D, and now it rounds off those edges. it's still very low polygon, but if I moved it in, then you wouldn't have that blend. So it's just something I wanted to point out. So last thing to wrap this tutorial up, we have our matte color, and you can see that image is applied to your material in your color view. In this case, I only made one color channel. You can also, if you wanted to have a little bit of shininess, you could have some luminance, and you can start playing around with these different channels. If you wanted a bump texture, you could have that channel as well. I wanted to keep this pretty simple and straightforward with just images, but I just wanted you to understand where this image pulls from. So if you do move this into a different file or a different folder on your computer, you just reapply this matte color TIFF to your color channel, and you should be good. Just as long as you don't adjust any of the UVs. So we have these little parts to the eyes. If you put eyes on anything, it automatically turns into a character. So what you can then do is make a new color, and just doing this real quick, just to complete this, you can then apply a color to your brows. You can make a new one, grab the eyedropper and grab any of the color here. We'll make this for the lids. And now for the eyes, all you really have to do is make white for the eyes. And pull this out. Okay. Let me close this, and we'll pull this to the eyeball. And for the other one. And now we have the cornea, and we can use the same color that we used for the brow. Put that on there and here. And now, if you render, you can see we have this set up. You now can use images in Bodypaint for your own models and your own projects. I put a link in the description to download project files. You can also go to astronomic3d.com to download project files from this tutorial and all the tutorials that I've made so far. Thanks for watching.